Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on age assurance. Me and Philip have literally been waiting for weeks to be able to have this conversation with all of you today. What can you expect from this discussion? So, to be honest, to give you a quick tour of what we have in store, but remember, this is also a conversation you can influence with your question using the platform. We're going to start by putting ourselves in the shoes of the buyer and try to give you some keys about how to navigate, because let's be honest, the complexity is high, and this warrants some support. But then we're also going to look at the development of the compliance landscape and try to focus on very specific development that we think are significant and give also some keys. And then, of course, we want to be customer-centric and end-user event-centric here and look at the experience and maybe try to define with you what are the key ingredients for an ideal user experience for this age insurance. And lastly, we also want to give you some keys and an idea of a framework that allows to assess the solutions we have on the market. But off we go. I'm Hubert Beagle. I'm a Chief Product and Technology Officer at Verif. Verif is the team that's here on a mission to make the internet a safer place. We have articulated the problem of trust online around 3 questions, which are 3 portfolio. Are you who you say you are, with our IDV and age verification solutions? We have also this other question, which is, are you a person? Are you even the person? And this is where biometrics come into play, and our technology does liveness. And age estimation, which you can play with the QR code that you have on this one slide, and tell us how you feel it's doing justice to your age. And the last, but maybe not the least question is, can you be trusted? This is where Verif provides its customers lots of solutions for database verification, and combined with the other portfolio, that creates more end-to-end solution for specific verticals like FinServe or gig economy, etc. But this is me, Philip. Great to have you today. Do you mind tell us a bit about you and about Liminal, and then we get kicked off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Hubert. And thanks to the Verif team for having me. Really excited to be here. Philip Verley, Chief Innovation Officer at Liminal. I've been there for 9 months. Prior to that, I was in this age assurance space at Google, where we built the entire stack for all our products there. So timely topic, super relevant. It's, it got big in 2020. It's really exploded in 2025. So that journey of 5 years has really seen a lot of activity in this age space. Liminal itself, we are a intelligence company, so we provide insights and intelligence for complex and regulated markets. So if you are looking for research on age assurance, cybersecurity, trust and safety, we are that stop for you. We work with members on all things related to go-to-market, product development, everything like that. But about today's topic, I actually used the QR code and very flattered. It did get close, and it actually a little younger, so it was even better for me. But yeah, very excited to be here.
That's cool. Thank you very much, Philip. So yes, as I said, we're going to get kicked off just trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer. And if I think of myself as the buyer, like, where do I start, Philip? In terms of understanding my compliance obligations, given the territorial differences we see, and when is it time to jump to solution, I guess? How do you look at that?
Yeah. As a buyer, it's not easy. It's a very hard area to uncover or to try to understand. Is my content deemed harmful to children? If we're talking about vape pens and pharmacy and things like that, easy, right? It's an easy restriction. You got to be over a certain age. You do a full-blown verification check. We're not talking about that. We're talking more about like, hey, I have a website and I know kids are on this website. Now I got to do something, but I'm a US website. Do I have to worry about my regulations? I live in California. Do I have to worry about my regulations in California? Are there federal regulations? But I have a lot of users in Australia. I have users in the UK and Europe. So you just unwind that ball of twine, and it never ends. So first of all, as a buyer, don't panic, right? Try to take a deep breath and figure out who's doing what. And so I would say that you would look at maybe your competition. You'd start asking vendors like yourselves about, hey, have you seen this use case? What are some of these other folks doing? Don't hesitate to reach out to folks that may have done this already or that are looking at this area as well. So I would look at it that way. And then once you've done that, you got to figure out, what do you want to do with this space? How do you balance the compliance, the user experience, and the risk to your business? Because if you are looking at that, if you're looking at those 3 points, that's what you got to look for, is like, what am I more concerned about as an organization? Is it the compliance angle? Is it a customer experience angle? Or is it the business risk? What's the impact to my business? And so I think that's kind of where you need to start. And then you can figure out, okay, I'm really concerned about the user experience. Great. Maybe you lean a bit more into that one. So I think that's kind of where you start as a buyer.
That's great. And I like how you also get into mapping out first the requirement, then the risks. Do you think that at times, actually, the concept of age assurance, which it's true, is mostly driven by compliance right now, right? But do you think it comes with opportunities as well in terms of positioning your brand, positioning it, or it's actually not really something you've seen being useful for businesses?
Yes, 100% yes, that this can be a differentiator. And I look back at the days of, when I was working at Airbnb, it was all about trust and safety. The only reason you come to Airbnb is because you have an implicit trust in that brand. Would you rather rent a room on Craigslist or Airbnb? And so making sure that you continue to keep that trust was the number one piece that we focused on. Very similar to age. If you are able to have a very trustworthy platform, think dating sites. Dating sites want to make sure that they're all adults. Or social media, that you are you're connecting with other social media users, and it's not kids, and there's no concern about talking to minors or doing something illegal. So I think it's really focused on that trust piece. And so if you are able to get outside the idea that, hey, this is just compliance, I can actually do this for the betterment of my platform, for the betterment of my users, my community, I really do think there is something that you can differentiate. Comes with the kicker. It's all about the experience, right? Because if you are saying, hey, I'm going to make sure that I'm able to estimate everyone's age, that's an experience impact. So you got to make sure, again, we talked about those 3 things: compliance, experience, business impact. You have to make sure they stay balanced. And so, again, yes, I do think that, but you have to be very cognizant about how you implement it so that you don't over-index on one of those points.
Yes, I like it a lot. And then maybe when I think about this problem, I see our customers, I think we can also mention the fact that there is a kind of data outlook you need to have on 2 levels, right? One is if you're talking about trust, actually, there is always a kind of a mesh of data that you need to first assess from a business perspective. What data do you already have? And actually, trust, it tends to want you to consider data about your customers as a continuum. And so if you already have a very stringent KYC process, for instance, like age estimation, adding it on top of it, is a very different problem than you being a dating website where you don't want to have intrusive mechanism to kind of force your customer base to provide a full identity when it's not necessary. So there is already this ability to understand where you are with sensitive data and trust data for your customers, and then what the right increment to kind of provide the compliance, as you said, the compliance, the risk management, etc. Do you agree with this? And have you seen people having different approach to kind of manage this kind of data landscape and stay in control, I guess?
Yeah, again, yes, absolutely. And where this again becomes very important is in your it's in your really the estimation piece. It's in the content, the social media world. It's where it's not about that pharma. It's not about the vape pens. It's not about restricted goods where you full blow KYC because you're expecting that, right? We talked a lot in my previous role. we talked a lot about contextual awareness.
Hmm.
What does that really mean? What that means is that, hey, I'm a user, I'm watching a YouTube video, which I've done, today I've watched 3 YouTube videos. I just click, I go to the next one, I click. And next thing you know, a restriction pops up and says, hey, for you to watch this next video, you have to prove your age. The context is not there, because I've watched YouTube videos for years and I've never had to do this. When you're buying a vape pen or you are buying, pharmacy stuff, the context is I have to prove who I am before I can buy this. So the contextual awareness is right there. So that's where it becomes really important, as you mentioned, is like, don't just tackle this problem with your typical KYC solution. If I were to ask anyone that's watching a YouTube video that's restricted, say, hey, Hubert, I know you really want to watch this video, but before you can do that, I need your name, your address, your date of birth. If you're in the US, I'll take the last 4 of your social. And if that doesn't work, I'll take your Gov ID and your face. You're like, yeah, no. Close. I'll just go look at TikTok, right? I'll go watch some TikTok videos. Maybe me and you could go do a TikTok dance later. But that is the contextual awareness that is missing. And so that's where those signals you mentioned become extremely important. How do you, as a buyer that is on one of these platforms, how do you put these puzzle pieces together of the data you already have and the data you can supplement with vendors? How do you put that puzzle together where, again, you balance that compliance to that experience? And so that's the ultimate trick that you got to try to pull off, is figuring out how to work the data you have, collect information that you can collect in a appropriate, contextually aware, appropriate way, to then make sure you stay compliant.
Yeah, that's great. And I like how you talk about the context, because another thing I tend to recommend a lot is to even, so on one side, we already said you have your requirement from a compliance perspective, your risk management and mapping out. Then you have your data landscape. And the last thing for me is really the customer lifecycle, right? And where exactly do you instrument yourself? And there are many ways of doing it, but the truth is it's rarely just one touch point. And if you start talking about the context, as you say, then you start being really clever on where is the right time and what the relevant. And then maybe the last thing we could talk about, for sticking to the buyer perspective, is that what do we recommend in terms of engaging vendors and actually, like, do I need to try a lot of solutions? Do I need to kind of shortlist first on purely on pay-per-views, and then but what the importance maybe of trying, and then what do I try to validate, do you think, Philip?
Yeah, it's super hard, right? Being a recovering buyer myself, it's really hard to cut through the what's marketing versus reality. And for me, excuse me, for me, it comes down to a couple of things. One, the reputation of the vendor. Do they have a good reputation in the market? I know very, very well. I know Carl from back in the day when we were talking about doing things at Airbnb. And I've, met him in my previous role as well. We're doing some things and everything like that. So I know Carl, and I know I can trust Carl. So if I could trust Carl, I could trust Farov. So for me, that's a lot of it. But then the second part of it is, what actual product capabilities and technical features do you have that can solve my use case? Because again, I got a lot of vendors coming in saying, hey, I can do age for you. I just need name, address, date of birth, last 4 social, Gov ID, selfie. I'm like, I can't do that. That does not work. That does not work for this use case. So the second part is, does the vendor understand your use case? And do they actually want to understand the use case, get to the bottom of it? And then the third piece is, how do we creatively solve that use case? Because a lot of things out of the box don't really fully work. So it's like, can you find a vendor that becomes your partner in this journey? Because if the vendor is successful, if I'm successful if the vendor's successful. So we're both on this in this canoe going down this river. If we don't paddle together, we're not going anywhere. So going through that motion, and yes, it's not easy, takes effort, but you will find the right vendors that will bubble up to the surface that will come and say, hey, what is your problem? They're not like, oh yeah, I can solve your age thing. Yeah. And they've never heard of it, or they're like, it's just KYC light. It really isn't. It's the farthest thing from KYC light you can ever think. I don't know how you feel about that, Hubert, but I feel like you all go into a lot of companies, right? So
we do. It's true for me. There are two things I keep seeing as critical. You have to test exactly for the reason you said that you need to sort out the marketing from the reality. And I would say when you test, of course, you cannot. It's expensive to test, right? So you can't test dozens of people. But the things that you want to keep monitoring and assessing yourself is first, there is this concept of accuracy. Like all these solutions actually have one job to do is to estimate or verify the age with accuracy. And it's very easy actually to be lost into secondary features like orchestration, consent. They're all important, right? But at the end of the day, there is one job to be done is you need an accurate decision made by the systems. And the second thing is, okay, but now you're accurate, but you need to preserve the quality of experience and the conversion. And then suddenly, even if it has all the compliance requirements you were hoping, even if it has the UX you wanted to give to your customers, and it has the accuracy you wanted to have, maybe it takes 5 seconds to make a decision, and that's killing your flow, right? And so there are a lot of non-functional requirements that you wouldn't even be able to articulate fully, and unfortunately, you just need to kind of give it a spin, and then. But I really, really like what you said before, and it's going actually to give us a segue for the next topic. It's a partnership because it's a developing environment. So even if your use case is not unique, and you should expect an out-of-the-box solution in there. The thing is, the compliance landscape and the behaviors of the customers are evolving too rapidly for you to be confident that whatever you've chosen today is going to be the same solution and the same setup for the next even 3 years, right? So you need to be able to see in the eyes of your provider that they have your back, that they are going to figure things out with you. And it's true. I can't recall of actually a very good customer story where it didn't come through us being a bit confused as well on our side and trying to scratch our brain to figure how to create the right level of, again, consent, for instance, is a big challenge. And how do you marry that up with the conversion rate that you want to give to this flow? So, yeah, no, I really like what you said. So maybe should we move to the compliance landscape? And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about what you see as recent developments that you think are significant and maybe kind of moves the lines of how we want to do things.
Yeah, there's so many things moving, right? I feel like I need to. I honestly, in our tool, we have a monitor. I have the monitor set up, and it's just like it just keeps loading these new requirements and new regulations that are being discussed, that have passed some parliamentary body, some government body. But to get to the point, the big ones over the last, what are we, May now? Last 5 months, we'll talk 2025, are the social media ban in Australia. There is it's a crude way of saying it, but they basically banned anyone under the age of 16 from access to social media. Now, okay, sounds interesting, right? 16 social media. Okay, well, what is social media? What constitutes social media? I can ask you, Hubert. I'm sure, yes. What's called now X, definitely social media. What about YouTube? Is that social media? Yes or no? Now you got to look in the rule and say, okay, well, what is constitute social media? It's connecting to other folks and being able to connect with them and talk to them. Yeah, I guess, but you can turn comments off. So see where the confusion already starts on the definition of what is social media. So now you have to figure out, are you a social media company? And then under 16 sounds compelling as well. Okay, that makes sense. But now the unintended side effect is, for you to prove you're over the age of 16, every single Australian is going to have to prove their age. So now I have to prove that I'm over the age of 16. And I'm not even the target audience, right, as the under 16s. So some of these laws have these weird side effects that are like, oh, crap, Now we have to verify everyone's age because we got to figure out who's under the age of 16. We got to define what social media means. So that's one. And we'll get back to that one in a second. The second one is the Ofcom in the UK and their new adult content regulations. So everyone has to register. They have new restrictions on adult content, and these websites have to have a robust age verification process in place. What you can read on that one is, okay, well, self-declared age is no longer enough. You can't just say, yes, I'm over the age of 18 or 21 or whatever the age is. You actually have to provide evidence that you're over a certain age. So that's another one. And then the third one that I thought was pretty interesting is that in the United States, the Supreme Court has sided with the state of Texas on this pornography law.
Yes.
And so again, very similar to the UK one, hasn't fully come out yet, but that could open the door to all of these states in the US to have their own separate age verification laws, which becomes a nightmare for buyers. Because now you don't just have to figure out country by country, you're gonna have to figure out state by state. And again, as I mentioned, this area is evolving so rapidly, there's just more regulations popping in left and right. Once the social media ban happened in Australia, UK, Sweden, Germany, Denmark, we're all saying, sounds interesting. I'm going to look at that as well. So I'm fully expecting more of these bans to come across. And there's just no overall framework that's like, hey, this is the guidance for everyone. It's very focused country by country. And in the US, I'm worried that it's going to be state by state.
Yes, no, it's not getting simpler. When you look at that development, like, what have you seen in the space of, because now, we suddenly want to ask ourselves, okay, so there is so many contrasts and there is so many moving targets, like, how much should I expect the vendor to absorb this complexity for me? How much, like, should I accept that? Because the truth is, because this is such a developing picture, the solutions are not there like straight away, right? So how do you look at this kind of delineation of how we manage this, and where do we get the solution space so that we can stay reasonably in check with this moving target?
Yeah, I think it came back to something we mentioned a couple minutes ago, is like, find the right partner, not vendor, partner. Because if I find a vendor, that's fine. It'll scratch my itch, right? But I don't think I will have the right partner to hand over or be a partner on, hey, these new regulations are coming in. This is what's happening here. I got to make sure that I have the right, again, I'm going to keep saying the word partner, to go down that path, because it's not going to reflect badly on the partner / vendor. It's going to reflect badly on you as the buyer. Your company's under this regulation. Your company has to comply with this. Oh, the vendor told me this. When has that worked? Right? Look at the Juul use case. Juul's like, oh, our vendor stunk. Well, you picked them. What did you do, right? They didn't find the vendors, they find Juul. And so, yes, to your point, you should go on a journey together, but you got to make sure you have the right partner. But still, in the back of your mind, you're the responsible and liable party. So you must make sure that you are staying abreast of what's going on. But again, you find that right partner, you will have a lot of help in that area. Yes,
no, it's definitely a good point. Because, if I marry up two things you said, which I agree with, you said before, like, you need to be acutely aware of the context in which you're going to want to apply this type of solutions. And now we also highlight the fact that that there is all this developing picture and all this contrast from territory to territory, and then we say, yes, the partnership is a great way to create the right trade-off, so that you always get to find a way forward for your needs. But it's true. Maybe one challenge I see in our industry is that, if I can so say, an age assurance solution is a point solution almost by definition, right? And so this concept of context that you were bringing before it suddenly like becomes an interesting challenge, because either you actually want to manage this context with your partner, and then there is this concept of and it's interesting because I see also this developing trend where, of course, every service consumer is going to want to have not too many providers for a lot of efficiency reason. But in this space, because we're talking about sensitive data most of the time, or at least not protecting it and not having to require it, you almost want to look at your partner not just as an age assurance partner, but more as a trust partner, right? And then suddenly this context you want to manage, like maybe you want to understand a bit more like how much you want a point solution partner or a trust partner, where suddenly like this context becomes a bit more something that can be managed through their platform, their ecosystem. And I find it, if even completely transparent with you, I find it hard sometimes for us at Verif even to position our Verif offering cleanly, because I know this context is paramount, but I also know that we want to be the best on these point solutions, and this is where we obsess even. But if I can't show that I understand your context and I can even handle some of it for you, then maybe this partnership is still useful, but it's less clear how it's going to work for me as a buyer. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, I think that, yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've never been on the vendor side, but as a vendor, it can be easy, right? Because you are building a product you think is like the thing, it's going to work so well. And then a buyer comes in and say, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. I want this. But and again, it's such a hard balance to make sure that you don't bastardize your product, but you still solve that problem for the customer. And I think, again, that comes where you have to really understand the problem and the use case and how to solve that use case. And the use case between, even between YouTube and TikTok, both have to do age, but both have a different requirement, maybe a different spin on it, different flavor on it. YouTube has to worry about all of the other Google products that are tied into it. If the YouTube flow fails, does that impact the other products? TikTok, pretty straightforward. It's, hey, you want access to my platform? That's it. There is no other consequence. It's just a one product use case. Whereas some other companies, you have multiple products in there. So even though they have the same issue in the same country with the same regulation, it's a different flavor. And I think vendors that can be flexible in that sense, that can tweak and customize their solution to fit that context, they're the ones that are going to win. Yes.
And I like what you say. Like, this is something I say a lot to my team, is like, you don't work for the customer, you work with the customer. And then there is a lot of possibility that opens up. Okay, and then there is a question, before we move to maybe the experience side of things, there is actually a question that could be a good transition. We are asked by someone in the audience, who is doing this well, this age verification, and what can we learn from such examples? Do you have a name that comes to mind?
Well, I can't say Google because, I built that one. So I'm like, oh, that's, you should look at that one. It's amazing. And it wasn't just me, obviously. It's a big team, that built that thing. I would say if you're looking at some of the big technology companies, they are doing as much of this balancing act that I've been talking about, this compliance, to business risk, to user experience, because for them, it's super important. It's the user experience ultimate king. If the experience sucks, you just don't download the app, right? There's limited real estate on this device. And if my experience is terrible, I'm not going back there. So that's where I would say, if you're looking for an experience angle, look at some of the big social media companies, look at the big technology companies. If you're thinking about like the regulatory angle or the compliance angle, look at some of the restricted good purchases. And so I think there's something to learn there as well. And what I would look for is, where in the flow are they putting this proposition? Is it right at the front? Is it somewhere in the middle of the flow? Is it at some point where you're like going to engage and you're like super excited to do something, whether that's a purchase, whether that's watching a video, whatever it is, whether it's making a comment, making your own video? at that point, or is it somewhere else? That's where you can start recognizing how these companies are approaching this and what they are prioritizing. Are they prioritizing experience, the compliance, or the business risk? Look at where it's in the flow. I know. Do you have any example there
Yeah,
of like
one of my favorite example is, do you know Starship, the delivery company? Like first they're really cool because they have robots in the street that just go to your home, and we help them
unless
with,
they get stuck in a pothole and then they're like
you know, they're fairly clever bots actually. When I go to Tallinn, which I do regularly, like you see them around there, and I don't know, there's something cute about them, and also, again, clever. But anyway, the way they do age-restricted deliveries, I think, is a good example of even almost creating a wow effect instead of a hassle in the flow for unlocking the box for when you have alcohol, for instance, in your delivery. So yeah, I think it's a good example, and it goes back to exactly what you say. But what we can learn here is even like don't think you need to mitigate the friction. Try to create a wow effect at the experience level, and then actually you're probably doing it right. Yeah. Now, let's try to think about this experience a bit more, right? Maybe did you have any high level like do's and don'ts that you want to share with us that you think are critical for maintaining the right level of experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Do's definitely do provide choice, provide consent, and control. It's the 3 C's: choice, consent, control. You want to provide your user certain choices. Not everybody likes selfie. I love selfie. I'm a huge fan of selfie. Like, you know, if you scan the QR code right now, it's so seamless. It's like, what, 5 seconds, 3 seconds? I don't even know. It's like, hey, put your face in the circle and you're done. Not everybody likes selfies, right? Not everybody likes the collection of biometrics, even though probably data is not collected, it's not getting stored, none of that. But it's a hard thing to explain. So providing choice, whether that's a selfie, an email check, a phone check, a GovID check, provide the user choices that they feel comfortable with, which also ties into certain markets. Certain markets over-index on certain techniques. So if you're looking at, you know, rolling something out in Europe versus Australia, not the same market. It is very different. So you have to make sure that you are looking at what are the solutions that they're more comfortable with in Australia compared to, say, Germany or Belgium. So that's one. Do consent. Obviously, you want to ask for consent for the user to provide this information. And then the third piece, as I mentioned, is control, that they have control over the data, that after this check is done, they can decide whether to store it, delete it, or whatever, but give them the control over their information. So definitely those are the do's that you want to make sure. And then what you don't want to do is have it verify everybody. If you are having to verify everyone, you're doing something wrong. There's something off with that, because your population is just not all kids. It's not all adults. You got to find that right balance. What is that balance? What is the breakdown of your audience? So that may be another do. Understand your customer. Like, who is actually on your platform, right? If I'm on, you know, I keep picking on YouTube and TikTok, but the YouTube demographic is slightly older than the TikTok demographic. The Roblox demographic is probably even younger than the TikTok demographic. So if you, as Veriv, go into those 3 companies, you can't sell the same thing, right? You cannot say, oh yeah, I can solve this for you. Again, you got to understand that use case and understand that on Roblox, it's probably a 50-50 split kids. I'm probably underestimating. So you got to really understand. So don't just slap something in there because you think it's going to work. Understand the problem, understand the user, understand the customer, understand that use case. So I think those are some of the big do's, don'ts that I'm thinking of right now.
No, it's great, and I can't really add too much to it. Like I really actually like your 3 C's, and it's true. What speaks the most on this front is actually still your conversion rate and looking carefully at your analytics for your, because it's always actually super hard to understand and predict what will have which effect.
Absolutely.
One development I want to believe is going to help, but particularly for the, you already helped us realize that, there is the people who have hard requirement and they need to do age verification. And here, there's less kind of room for improvisation. But I'm curious about whether you see a future where for the less hard restriction for the rest of the market, do you think that a risk-based approach could also help, as in, you do age estimation with something very lightweight, and you can even try to reuse from earlier signals. Do you think that there is room for this kind of risk-based flow for doing age assurance in a way that's useful for the UX?
Totally, absolutely. And going back to the hard one real quick, where you can get creative there is where you place it in the flow. If you are, I keep selling pharma pills, I feel like Hubert, I feel like we both use some pharma pills. I don't know. But I'm selling pharma pills. If the first step in that process is for me to verify my identity, I'll probably drop. But if I'm able to hey, this is what I want, and it's going to get delivered tomorrow, and the next step is, oh, you need to prove your ID, I'll probably do it, right? Because I'm so close to the finish, I know what I'm going to get. So again, yes, you must get the requirements done, but where you put them is up to you, and where you think in your flow their most ideal experience. On the softer side, 100%, it's all about a risk-based approach. It's in the regulations as well. It's you must take a risk-based approach to your platform. You, as a platform, decide what type of risk you apply based on your platform's riskiness, which sounds like a very circular way of saying it. But yes, that is what it is. It's if you are a platform that is very, is deemed very harmful to children, you better have a very high bar for that. But if you're just doing some videos or, some light content that's non-adult, that is, maybe some weird videos, your risk tolerance probably goes up and says, hey, you know what? I can use signals. I can use some behavioral analytics to determine whether or not I think Hubert is an adult or not. And if I'm uncomfortable, maybe I prompt them. I'll trigger them to go do a selfie. I'll trigger them to do an email check or a phone check, something like that. So yes, absolutely. If you don't have that risk-based approach in there and using behavioral analytics and signals, you're going to end up trying to verify everyone, which is going to be a terrible experience.
Thanks, Philip. And to be honest, we are actually coming really close to the end of our time together, but I wouldn't want us to leave the audience.
I feel like we just got started.
I know. I have the same feeling. So I have to say, I keep check on the time, and I'm surprised. But let's go into, I think you already started giving us a lot of keys, but in terms of assessing solutions, do you have a bit of a framework that you can help us with so that we know how to do it?
You mentioned it too, right? You just got to kind of give it a wing. But that's the hard part about assessing solutions is you won't know until they go into production. Because if I do a data test, data test is a bad example. If I do a data test, you can get back, I'll send you 1,000 names, addresses, date of births, whatever. You come back and say, oh, I found 92%. Great. I kind of know what that number is. I'm going to be like, okay, my pass rate should be around that area, give or take. With some of these risk-based approach, with some of these, non-deterministic ones like selfies and things like that, it's really hard to test because unless you put it in production with, a Pixel phone or an Android One phone or an iPhone, good lighting, bad lighting, a mask, a hat, glasses, you don't get a good sense until you put it in what's going to happen. So what I rely on a lot is I'll make sure vendors have certifications, and people probably scoff at certifications, but it's a minimum bar. Like if you've done the work to get certified, you're taking your stuff serious and you are at least passing some sort of threshold. Then the second part I'd be looking at is can I look through the industry, where else are they using this solution? If they're using it at a competitor of mine and I trust that competitor, then I'm like, okay, well, I should probably take a real look at these folks. So I think it's a lot of that is looking looking at other places, and then you bring them in. I bring in vendors all the time. I look at them all the time. And you will eventually get pretty good at figuring out what is marketing versus what's reality. It also shows as who they bring to the meetings. If they're just bringing sales and marketing, you're in trouble, right? If they're not bringing a product person or an engineering person, you're like, okay, well, is this all vaporware, or is there actually real humans behind them that are building these things? So that's kind of where I kind of look and try to figure that out. But to your point, it's super hard unless you put it in production, and that is a very, very costly to do.
Yes, and just to add a couple of things, I mean, again, I think your framework of compliance, user experience, and then business risk, like I think if you expand on that and create your test plan, using the 3 dimensions, I think you will come actually with a fairly good assessment already. In terms of business risk, I have to say we talked a lot about compliance, but there is something also to be said about the kind of fraud element, right? Which nowadays with deep fakes and whatnot, becomes so a big topic for this kind of assurance. And so I think it's also something to be said that you want in your test plan to kind of also have some consideration for this type of risks. And maybe the last thing that's maybe surprising to coming from me, but it is expensive to do a test with 1 vendor, so it's even more expensive to do it with 2 vendors. But it may come with perspective, and also, let's be honest, we are in an industry where particularly big players are going to want to have a multi-vendor strategy. And so in the end, whether you get actually more perspective for selecting the partner, or whether you get actually also something that actually is all going to production with allowing you to edge yourself from different type of risk again you're trying to mitigate. Yeah, it's expensive, but in the end, if you're trying to build something that's going to be the strong partnership that you want to go through the next few years of evolution of compliance, it could be actually a good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we actually have one more question from the audience, and then I think it's going to be a wrap. One more question. So the question is actually like there are lots of variables, but don't we need to test them all before launch? So I guess the question becomes like how much thoroughness you should apply in this testing. What do you say, Philip?
Yeah, it's yes. Totally, right? That would be the ideal. If I could test all the variables, I would. I 100% would. And I there is a lot of advancements that we've made in doing that, but test and production is still so different. And an example of this is research. We do it. In my previous role, we did a ton of research, user experience research. What do users really want? And so one of the things that came out of research is that folks in Australia dislike selfie. And we're like, well, that's surprising. And they love GovID checks. So we experiment and put selfies and GovIDs in the flow. Number 1 picked solution, selfie. So you can do as many tests in advance, and you can do as much of these variable testing as possible. But then there's production, and then there's actual consumers who will throw you for a loop if you think you've tested everything. And so, yeah, you want to try and do as many as possible. And again, it's a little easier if you're doing the data checks. It's a lot harder when you're doing some of these non-deterministic things like a risk-based approach, selfies, that just you'll have to do some testing in the wild to really get a good answer of, is this really working, or do I need to adjust? And again, comes back to our conversation from before. If you have the right partner, they'll adjust and tweak with you to figure out what is and how we make this happen.
Yes, I can't disagree with this. And I get the engineering in me is also thinking that, of course, you want to validate everything, but it's still about risk management, right? And so
yes,
if you think about classic release engineering techniques like A/B testing and the soft rollout, and then you have a phase plan, because particularly if you're going to go across several jurisdictions, then you also want to treat each one of them as kind of a separate topic. But if you follow this kind of safe approach to go live, I think, again, you can also make sure you don't go into analysis paralysis, and because they're kind of validation you want to do can be easily endless as well. So I think it's also just about doing it in a controlled fashion, going live,
Yes.
and then being able to kind of iterate until you find that you have what you need. Okay, well, everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for the very thoughtful question. Philip, I had a blast. Thank you so much for your enlightenment. And well, I think we should do it again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Goodbye, everyone. I hope you had a good time. And well, see you next time.
See ya.